Why did Tyronn Lue get fired? Are they trying to tank in Cleveland? What isn't working with the Cavs? The only question left is, say it with me, you win? Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown Podcast Emergency Pod to talk about the Tyronn Lue firing by the Cleveland Cavaliers. And no one better to bring on the show than friend of the breakdown, Joe Vardon, who is a senior NBA writer for The Athletic. Joe, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, I can imagine that you are breathless trying to cover this story. Was there ever an indication until today or before today that this might happen and Tyronn Lue would get fired?
Well, nobody ever came out and said it, but I mean, the lines were pretty well drawn in the sand last week when, before they play the Hawks, Ty and Koby at Koby Altman's direction sit down three of their longest tenured veterans and say, listen, we're going young. They go out that night or the next night against the Hawks in the home opener and get drilled. And the next day, Ty shows up at practice and says, you know what? We're going back to the veterans. He didn't ask for Koby's permission to do that. And so he kind of put everything on the line right there. He's like, I'm going to play who I want to play. I'm going to do it my way. It didn't work. They went 0-3 during that stretch. And so there you have it. I mean, if you're going to lose and the coach isn't going to be on the same page as the general manager, that's just that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, talk about that Atlanta Hawks game when they did go young, according to Altman's direction. What went wrong so poorly in that game?
Yeah, so they were beaten 133-111. The Hawks hit a team record 22 threes. Trae Young went for, I think, 35, if I remember. But the Cavs were ahead by as many as 15 in that game. And basically, at the 6-minute mark, Colin Sexton comes off the bench for George Hill. Now, Colin coming out off the bench to play, there's nothing wrong with that. And the veterans love him, and they want him to succeed, and it's fine. But coming in when he did was kind of the first signifier to the players that things were different, that they were going younger and going to give more minutes to the younger guys. Word hadn't exactly spread by tip-off to the entire team that Kyle Korver and J.R. Smith and Channing Frye had been told they would in fact no longer be playing because the team was going young. So that had kind of begun to spill out across the bench as the game started. And then you see Sexton go out there and just kind of like all their inner strength just was kind of zapped. And they played with no spirit that night. And you can see it.
Wow. So I guess is the implication here that they didn't fire him right after that or after the game that Tyronn Lue went back to the way he wanted to play his players. So is that implication that Altman was willing to say, okay, let's see how this goes, and his patience was only as long as 2 games or 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, like when you step back though and you look at the totality of it all, certainly this season, I mean, Ty and Koby had been clashing since the start of training camp, if not before it, about who should be playing and how much each guy should be playing. So this was an ongoing struggle. And if you even go back to last year, a year that ended in the finals, by the way, there was some clashes over who should be playing and when. And, from Koby's perspective, there was some frustration that the Cavs were so consistently poor on defense. And also a little bit of frustration that the way Ty managed the roster when Derrick Rose was here and Jay Crowder and Dwayne Wade and Isaiah Thomas and all those guys. And so the frustrations were already there. And they start to percolate again this year. But they kind of agree to get along. And then Ty shows up, like I said, and just says, you know what, I'm not doing it your way anymore. And that kind of amplifies everything. So now, they lose 2 more times. They come back home. The Pacers just pound them in the second half, just beat them like a drum. And all of a sudden, you're looking at 3 embarrassing losses at home. They had lost by a combined 50 points. And you could see it. You could see how this just this wasn't gonna work. And we're talking about this not working with the only coach in franchise history who's won a championship. So it's complex, it's emotional. That there should be forever indebted to Ty, but at the same time, you can see it. That kind of neither side was really into working with the other here.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this. When you said that they wanted to go young or they're interested in going young, does that not equate to tanking?
Right, and that was the thing, Nick. That's the problem with what happened a week ago is that this message, as it was delivered, is sort of like tantamount to tanking, especially in the veterans' eyes, and especially when they were told to a man by Koby Altman this summer that this would not be the case, that they would play to win, they would play most of the veterans, and that they would try to maintain the culture that had been built on their backs. And yes, of course, built around LeBron, no doubt about it. But those were the other guys who were here throughout it all. I mean, Kevin Love, they just handed him $120 million extra dollars. I get it, but he probably could have commanded a large sum on the free agent market next summer, and certainly the Cavs would have lost him for nothing had he walked. And so the one thing he needed to know to stay here and take their extension was, what are we doing this year? And the answer was, we are not tanking. So then this happens last week, and that was just kind of against what they had been told, and it was I don't want to say a soul crusher. That's a little bit dramatic, but it didn't sit well.
I mean, is there any way to defend the action of wanting to go young and sit Corver and those guys and still be really competitive?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that they could compete playing almost exclusively the young players that they have. I mean, you just watch Colin Sexton; he's just not ready. He's not ready for that, and he's doing some good things in some of these games. He was really pretty good in Detroit the other night. So that's great, but I mean, he's better when he's protected. And to make matters worse, Nick, by the way, the last two games of Tyronn Lue's tenure, Kevin Love didn't play.
Yeah.
And so once they went really old with Channing, but last night they played Sam Decker, who's 25, and it just didn't work out anyway. So, I think Kevin Love is the one who said it. He said it in my report last week that kind of detailed that all this stuff had happened. He said that the way you develop these young guys is to play the veterans. So that way there's not pressure on them. They learn by watching us. And so I tend to agree with that. But the flip side is the veterans had to play better too. And JR struggled in his three games since Ty made that move. And Corver didn't give him much last night. He was really good in Detroit. But it didn't happen between those guys and Kevin not playing, and you do it. If you look at these 6 games, they really haven't been close. I mean, they haven't been within a possession in the second half of any game, and so I some of the players and Ty have been talking about how they're close, but they really aren't. And so if they come out on whenever it is, Tuesday, I think, and play the Hawks and beat them, I mean, that would be a dramatic change from what we've seen so far this year.
Another dramatic change you could see in your own life is an easy way to invest in the stock market and cryptocurrencies, which is why I want to tell you about Robinhood, an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. I've been using their app, and it's really intuitive and easy to understand, with tons of good information to help you make decisions on what to invest in. In just 4 taps, you can make a trade without a charge, unlike other brokerages that could charge you $10 per trade, so you can keep all of your profits. If you're not that familiar with the market, and trust me, I'm a novice, you can easily get started with Robinhood. And best of all, wait for it, Robinhood is giving away a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at breakdown.robinhood.com so you can start now. That's breakdown.robinhood.com. Does the timing, people seem to be really upset about the timing because either they could have just got rid of them before the season started or, give him a chance. So is this timing, what is your reaction to it and why it comes 6 games into the season versus later or before?
Well, I think they certainly did not want to fire a guy after he had just come off of 3 consecutive finals. It would have looked so bad. I mean, because yes, they were bad defensively during the regular season. You and I actually did a whole podcast about it. Mm-hmm. But the fact remains they overcame that and they made it to the finals again. And so, now you're talking about firing a guy who came out and said that he was sick for 2 weeks from anxiety from the job. And at a time when we're being so much more open and understanding about mental health issues, that would have looked terrible. Mm-hmm. They owed Ty a ton of money. And, they were talking about the idea of maintaining the culture that was here. So you don't fire the coach who established that culture. So I get it. But again, I'm not sitting here today surprised because Ty showed up to work one day last week and said, I'm not doing what you want me to do anymore. He's kind of asking for it.
Yeah. Do you feel like the battle with anxiety, which doesn't necessarily ever go away, but that probably had no bearing on anything that happened this year, or is that safe to say, or do we know?
No, I think it did a little. He was. I don't know how many people caught this, but all of a sudden, early in the preseason, it was actually during the opener. Around the opener in Boston, all of a sudden Ty just couldn't walk. He was struggling to stand during the game, a couple games, and was really having a hard time walking. And it wasn't like he had done anything to hurt himself. And I think the actual diagnosis was the flare-up of a bone spur or something like that. But again, it wasn't like he had been working out or running. And I just think, again, that it was that anxiety played a role. Like he was starting again, taking over this team like the first day without LeBron. Not sure how all this is going to work out, and so yeah, I'm not a doctor. I can't prove any of that, and it's up to them to say what was wrong with him or not. I just know that all of a sudden, out of the blue, his body was failing him again, and it was just like what we saw last year.
Interesting. Well, that does bring us to the cloud that hangs over Cleveland, which would be LeBron leaving, and I'm wondering what that has to do with this, if anything.
Yeah, I mean. I really think you trace this back further. You trace it back to when David Griffin was not renewed. Griff was the one who hired Ty, and they were so close, and they won a championship together, and then they went back to the finals together. And there was really, it's Dan's team. He can do what he wants. But it's hard to make a sound argument that Griff should not have been renewed and should not have been given a raise and should not have been given whatever it was power-wise that he wanted, because all he had done in his time here was win, and yet that didn't happen. And I think that had a profound effect on Ty. And then in that same summer, they traded Kyrie Irving. And, look, we can go on for hours about the pros and cons of that and all that went into it. But at the end of the day, what you did was you took a 5-time All-Star point guard who hit the game-winning shot in Game 7 of the Finals, took him off your team, and ostensibly replaced him with a player in Isaiah Thomas whose hip has failed him to the point where he may never play. It's certainly at the level that he used to be at. And if he makes any kind of impact at all, that could be great. And that's who you replaced him with. And so that's really where this started to get out of hand. And then now you see LeBron leaves, and Ty was kind of left to try to put this all together, and he just didn't do it. The defense looks the same as it always has. The offense has not evolved anywhere close. And you could say, well, they don't have playmakers, and maybe that's true, but, you know, the system, like we were looking for a system, may be different now since you don't have that one super ridiculous all-star that you can kind of play through, and we just haven't seen it.
You know, and I guess the other thing that might have been interesting or better for Tyronn Lue, I would have thought, was perhaps the absence of LeBron would kind of let him do that coaching thing that he wants to do, because, you know, and maybe you didn't speak as freely as you could when LeBron was there. I don't even know, but it kind of felt like it was never always clear who was the coach when LeBron was there. Is that safe to say?
No, I don't agree with that, especially when it was Ty and LeBron working together. I mean, that first year that they ended up winning it all, I mean, Ty was pretty strict with LeBron, pretty stern with him. Also, you know, told Kevin and Kyrie in no uncertain terms that they had to put their personal brands aside and defer to LeBron. So Ty really did some heavy lifting.
Okay.
And then they won. You know what I mean? Like, so there was no more there was no more trust to be earned. Like, there was no more, you know, like sort of LeBron and Ty had gotten to the place where they needed to be, and then just as pieces left this team and this organization, Ty just stuck with LeBron, and so, you know, LeBron kind of took the responsibility upon himself. But I didn't get that feeling about LeBron being the coach instead of Ty like you had when David Blatt was here.
Okay. Well, that's another conversation we can have later about that. But nonetheless, I think we covered all the bases here. Are there any other pieces to this story as we move forward?
Well, yeah. I mean, there is. I mean, there's two big pieces that we need to look at just as reporters, and I certainly will be at The Athletic. Is you know, Larry Drew was here the whole time too. He's a part of the glory days, just like Ty is. And so what does he do that's different than Ty did? And was Koby right? Is there more talent on this team than we've seen? And does Larry find a way to cobble something together and get this team to be watchable? And then the other issue is, let's say the answer to those questions is no. How quickly do they embrace the tank? You know, they're like 4 or 5 games out of the 8th spot already. I think they're like 4, something like that. And you know, like, that's without tanking. You know, they just need to be right in the bottom 10 to make a draft. So when do they pull the plug if they haven't already? So those are two pretty big pieces of the story to tell.
Do we have to? Is there any more to read into the firing of Damon Jones as well?
I mean, he was here because he's very close to Ty. He also had a relationship with LeBron. That's actually how Damon was introduced to this organization, was through LeBron. Okay. That's kind of one of his body guys and one of his personal shooting guys. And then Damon hit it off with Ty, and they became close. And so now that Ty's out, it makes sense that Damon's out as well.
All right. Well, that all makes sense. And Joe, I can't thank you enough for coming on and breaking this down for us.
Oh, anytime.
You got it. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Joe?
I'm always in.